Hey, it is Jeff Jarvis here from the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism in the center of the universe, Times Square, with dotNYC's Startup Stories. I'm going to be showing you in a minute the coolest musical instrument you have ever seen. After we talk to the founder, we're also later going to have our nice Shark Tank with no money. And then we're going to have an Instructable teaching you how to do a hackathon. 3 separate shows. We're going to do them back to back here at the journalism school. So right now it's Startup Stories. It's an interview with Jacob Gordon, who has, I think, the coolest musical instrument that you'll ever see. You're going to want it. I can't play musical instruments, but I want to play with this because that's the whole point. It makes music fun. Why don't you just show us how it works, Jacob?
Sure,
Start there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. So what's different about this is we call this a multi-instrument, a musical multi-instrument. You plug it into your iPhone, your iPad, your Mac, or your PC, and basically you choose how you want to play it. This is a choose-your-own-adventure instrument. So strings and frets, if that's familiar, you can pick it, you can strum it, you can plug it, and push the button, and you're in violin. So you can slide between notes like a fretless instrument.
Right.
Push it again, you can set it down flat, and you're playing the piano. Right? And then one more time, and you've got 12 pads in front of you. So and you're playing the drums. And so those are your sort of basic atomic building blocks. From there you can combine your techniques you're playing with, the sound you're playing, and whatever tuning or layout of notes you want to design your own instrument.
And this is on sale now.
Yes, this has been our blood, sweat, and tears for a number of years. It was a Kickstarter campaign to launch it, and now it is on the market out there for people to play. It is $399 American dollars,
which is, I think, a good deal.
Good.
Why don't we play the video from Kickstarter, because I think it shows the kind of incredulity of what you get when you hit this thing. So Annie, can we hit the video?
I've never seen this thing before. It kind of reminds me of a space shuttle.
It's beautiful. I think it feels, even though I don't hold instruments often, it feels really comfortable.
It's so nice, so just...
Beautiful.
Oh, I like that. I can play it like a guitar.
Ooh.
I can play it like the keyboard that I use.
If you're don't know how to play an instrument like me, it's a good way to it's just a good way to get a good feel of the instruments.
That's cool how you can almost barely touch it and kind of you still get the sound, but then the harder you do it, it's got that attack,
I love the idea that I wouldn't need to hook it up to anything more elaborate, not
All right.
knowing much about musical equipment.
I love that video. Let's start with the Kickstarter campaign.
Sure.
Because I think it's as I understand, Kickstarter sees it as a model video and a model campaign. It works so well.
They are fond of it, partly because it broke a lot of the rules of how they typically tell people how to make videos.
So talk about that.
It took us a long time to decide whether we wanted to go the crowdfunding route. Through the process of it, we really fell in love with Kickstarter. The culture there, the way their commitment to both their creators on the one side and the backers on the other is just absolutely astonishing. I think they're very inspirational on a number of levels, not the least of which being a B Corp and really building these values into their corporate structure. But for us. We really wanted to make sure we had a product that was, we pretty much knew exactly what we were going to build, not necessarily how we were going to fully build it, but what we were going to make. And because of the stage we were at, we felt like we sort of wanted to tell a different kind of story on Kickstarter. Also, it's really common. It's sort of the model for a Kickstarter video to sort of appeal directly to the Kickstarter community. We kept it more of a sort of high-level narrative, and
more of a concept and product pitch.
yeah, and that's why a year later it still feels really, really relevant, and we didn't want to pigeonhole it into the crowdfunding vernacular 100%, but really keep it as broad as possible. Also, because we wanted to be able to appeal and speak to people who don't necessarily, they aren't crowdfunding veterans. They don't do this all the time. This might be their first crowdfund. In fact, a lot of the people who did back our campaign, it was their first crowdfund
But they
campaign.
lusted after this.
Yeah, and so we sort of helped bring some new people into that dialogue as well. So I mean, if you watch the video, you'll notice that doesn't say Kickstarter in there anywhere, and that's not a snub to Kickstarter at all. That was to sort of say, this is mainstream. Like, crowdfunding should be mainstream. If you want to invest in a product a little earlier than you would buy it off of a shelf, this is a great way to do it, and let's normalize that. Let's make that mainstream.
So you went up with the campaign when?
It was in the spring.
And you asked for how much and got how much?
We asked for $75,000, if I'm correct. We raised a little over $1.3 million in a 41-day campaign, if I have that right. It was about the longest 41 days of any of our lives. It's pretty intense.
Now, you knew you were going to raise more than $35,000.
We had high hopes for it, but really there's no way to know when you go in. There's just no way to know. And it was very grassroots and very organic, and sort of the definition of a viral effect.
So how many orders was that?
There was something over 3,000 from some 3,000 backers in something like 72 countries.
Wow. Now, you came into this with investment already, yes? Mm-hmm. From some well-known backers.
Yeah, we had been building the company for a number of years prior.
So give me the story of the company.
Yeah, I mean,
Start from the beginning.
some people launch on Kickstarter, and that's the beginning of the road for them. Other people have been at it for a while. We'd been at it for a while, although this wasn't a fully baked product sitting on a shelf. This still needed to be built, and every dollar of that crowdfunding money fueled the development and the final launch of the product itself. We had raised some angel investment from some interesting folks. Eric Ries, who wrote the book The Lean Startup, which I imagine a lot of watchers of this show have read. Steve Case, who's been very active with his Rise of the Rest campaign to try and find innovation hubs that are not in San Francisco, that are not in New York, that are not in Boston. Artiphon is spread out across the country, but we're based in Nashville, Tennessee, with branches in LA and New York here. Dave McClure and 500 Startups. So these are some of the early people who took a chance on us back when this was a prototype made out of wood. Looked a lot different than it does now, but it was still that core notion of a multi-instrument that you can play in any way you want, and an ergonomic instrument that plugs into the power of mobile apps and software.
So let's back up even farther and go to you and where you came from and what you were doing before and how you came to this.
Yeah. Well, the notion for this product itself came from the founder, CEO, and my business partner, whose name is Mike Butera, who comes from a philosophy background. So his PhD is in sound studies, which is an interdisciplinary field.
That his parents thought he'd never make any money on.
Don't ruin your life by getting a PhD in sound studies. And it's basically the examination of how we understand the world around us through listening, through our ears. It's not ethnomusicology, so it's not where the culture of music comes from, and it's not the neuroscience of how we hear. It's the frameworks of meaning that we use to interpret the world around us through our ears. He also grew up playing stringed instruments like violas and violins and cellos his whole life, and then the third leg of the stool was getting into consumer electronics and audio products, and first, sort of building things for other people for a minute, and then having this flash of inspiration and seeing what was going on with these amazing music studios that we're walking around with in our pockets, and saying, could we expand the power and the flexibility of what's going on there into a family of physical instruments? So that's really where the genesis of the...
How did you come into it?
He and I were nerding out. I was running a journalism-based startup of my own prior to that. That was sort of my substitute for going to business school, was raising some angel capital from an ex-boss, journalism boss, and saying, let's build some digital publishing tools around social annotation. How can people share their marginalia with one another? And that's when I sort of got hooked on the idea of startup business models, and 4 Steps of the Epiphany was kind of my Bible. My copy is like trashed beyond recognition at this point, and Eric Ries is the lean startup, and thinking about how new ideas come into the world and new methods for getting them there. And he and I were introduced by a friend in common who was like, you guys are both banging your heads against similar problems. You should probably create your own little group therapy session. And we did. So Sundays were our kind of commiseration days. And at this point I had moved to New York and he was in Nashville. And so we would do these day-long phone calls just being like, how do we solve these problems? And finally...
So what was the core, if you expressed that problem in the early days? Mm-hmm. 'Cause I love that idea that every startup solves a problem. Mm-hmm. How did you express it then?
Well, the first question that we put out there was, we have this notion for, so startups start in all different ways. Some start with a question and you're trying to fill in the blank, right? So people have a problem, people have a pain, you're trying to alleviate it. This was more sort of product vision oriented or concept vision oriented. This guy thought of this thing and was like, this would be awesome. Wouldn't it be amazing if this existed? What would people do with it? So the question in that case was, what will people do with it? Do people want it? Can we find a product market fit? And what does that product market fit look like? When we started out, we were theorizing that the most advanced string-like instrument controller for iOS devices was what we were going for. And we were looking at professionals who were merging computer music with traditional instrument techniques and things like that. And it really, and we got validation for that early on, and magazines picked it up and artists were really excited about it. A lot of people were like excited about it with this puzzled inflection to it. Like, that's really cool, but I can't quite figure out what to do with it. And it really took us a long time of asking that question, what is the fit between this notion, not necessarily this physical thing, but this notion, this concept, and people's need and people's creative impulse. And it was a big pivot point for us to say, this is an instrument for everyone. This is mass. This is meant to be for anyone who has a desire to be musically expressive. Can we help them find that pathway to actually expressing?
So a trained musician can use this, but a dolt like me can use this too and have fun.
This is really the goal, and it's an ambitious one to say we're casting such a wide net from if you're making your first note and you want to take the plunge and challenge yourself creatively, we absolutely want to cater to that. In fact, that's probably the most exciting thing for us. On the other hand, this is a very advanced musical instrument that can scale with you as far as you want to go and does things that nothing else out there does. And so pros love it, studio producers love it, performers love it, but I will emphasize that the most exciting challenge for us right now is someone who's not musically prolific, dolt, if you will, and inspire them to be have that creative confidence to be musically.
What's so great about it is that you can do a hell of a lot on an iPad, but this is more tactile. I feel more control when I see this. I have a sense of a space to play with and understand, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, touchscreens are amazing, and now with pressure sensitivity, you have more nuance and expression. It's still a black mirror. You're still tapping up against a glass rectangle, and music is physical and ergonomic and expressive, and just feeling something vibrate against your body is pretty amazing. Being able to play by touch and be able to look at the person you're playing music for, or your audience, or off into space. You don't have that tactile physical feedback.
And be Tom Cruise, and yeah. musical curiosity first. This is not a piano keyboard.
Nope.
So does a pianist take to it fairly intuitively, or is there training needed? Are there new piano lessons around this?
Sure. And so we have 4 little icons on the face of this instrument: a guitar, a violin, piano keyboard, and drums. Is it any of those things literally? No. These are representations of different modalities or gestalts, if you will. And so we can lay out these notes any way we want. So that's part of the adaptive, scalable complexity notion to it. The default way that it's laid out for people who like this stuff is about as simple as it can be. Chromatic, there's half steps going this way, and then these are octaves. So 6 octaves in this space. If you play black and white keys, it's a different layout. Of course, we can, hit the tuning button and we can lay it out any way we want. So no wrong notes. You can tell I like playing with this thing. I get really lost in it.
I'm living vicariously
it's not gone old
you.
yet, that's for sure. And similar with violin, you don't have a bow, although we have an iBow feature for the iPhone app, so you can use your iPhone as a bow. But with the bridge triggers, you're not bowing, you're pressing down, and this is controlling your attack and your sustain, and then you're sliding between your notes with your left hand. It does have an accelerometer, so if you flip it and you're a lefty, it knows and it'll retune it. So I won't.
Is there an API for other instruments? Can you do a sitar on it, or?
This is part of the really exciting part of the technology stack we built on. It speaks the language of MIDI, which I won't get too nerdy about, but is this universal computer music language. And it's what tells something like this what instrument sounds to play, what notes to play. It's super lightweight. It's a 30-year-old protocol. It's super robust. It's awesome. Because we built it all on MIDI, you don't even need an API. It'll plug in. It'll play nicely with tons of other music software, GarageBand on your tablet or your iPhone, or your laptop, and then everything up to the tools that pros are using every day, like Logic and Ableton Live and Pro Tools and all of those things.
So you're more of a hardware company than a software company in that case.
Well, we consider ourselves fully 50-50 hardware software. Okay. The app that I'm playing through right here is the Artiphon app, which is in the App Store. We also have a desktop app for your Mac and your PC. And we feel like we've been a primarily hardware company for a while because this was such a challenge to do. And in certain ways, software development is more forgiving. Not to say that this was easy to do. We did all the sound design for it. Every instrument in here was custom created sound that we made to play nicely with this. But going forward, we see our efforts equally divided between the hardware and the software.
All right, so I could geek out on the gadget forever, but we're trying to talk about startups and how companies operate. How large is the company? How many people?
We're 9 people.
So you're 9 people to come out with this. That alone would have been impossible 20 years ago. You take advantage of everybody else's platforms, right?
Yeah, the world of hardware product creation, consumer electronic creation, is very, very different than it was even 5 years ago.
Right. So what expertise do you have to have inside the company, and what kind of partners do you have to work with on the outside to make this reality?
Sure. Well, you need a good idea. Industrial design. So we partnered with a great firm, some friends, to help us work through this. We worked really, really closely with them to create this physical form, which I could nerd out on forever, but I won't. So sensor technology. So what's going on in the sensor stack here is rather complex, and it's using force sensing resistors. There's firmware, which sort of tells everything how to respond to the human interface, the touch. There's acoustics, because it has speakers in it. We're going through the sound system right now, but this has stereo speakers in it. There's the power management of the battery, and has a 4 to 6 hour battery life. And then there's the integration with the software. We chose a particularly challenging route, which is a Apple certified situation here. So the simple fact of having one cable that connects this device to your iOS device, which makes life very easy and convenient for the user, means it has to be an MFI, made for iOS product. So anything you buy at the Apple Store that has that little badge in the lower right-hand corner that says works with these devices means it went through this very arduous certification
and just to
process.
rewind for a second, I'm out of luck with my Android.
I'm afraid Android's a can of worms we haven't opened yet.
Okay, all right.
But it is
But I'm
on our,
geeking again.
Yeah.
So you have all of those elements and try to design and understand the product inside. You obviously needed you needed a industrial design firm to work with. Mm-hmm. You needed a manufacturing partner, I presume. And
yes, we have a contract manufacturer. We build these in China. Mm-hmm. We brought in a COO after the Kickstarter campaign who came from a music electronics background and had gone through the gauntlet before of working with a CM, contract manufacturer. That's not to say it's an easy path. Building anything complex with a partner on the other side of the world is a pretty serious challenge. You're talking about the ecosystem changing. There are a growing number of more sort of turnkey intermediary players that you can partner up with, the PCHs and the Dragon Innovations of the world, who will say, you be the product genius, you be the brand genius, you be the community activation, you work your sales channels. We'll figure out how to build this thing, or we'll work with you.
So you're not licensing to them, but you're giving them a good chunk of.
Well, there are all sorts of ways this can go. We didn't choose to go that way. Mm-hmm. We sort of we chose the path to dive in directly and work with the CM ourselves. And it is a serious road, not an easy one. And so, if people are contemplating a future in hardware product development and manufacturing overseas, take a hard look at what that world looks like.
Take me through the quick 5-year, not quick, 5 years is a long time, but the milestones over the 5 years.
Sure. So product conceptualization, and then very quickly getting into, on one hand, prototyping with Arduino boards and just trying to get it quick and dirty, and then trying to understand product market fit. So really looking at customer development methodology. Next was kind of blasting the idea out to the wider world, doing some PR stuff. Sorry?
How far into the 5 years are you at this stage?
So let's say year 2 was like, okay, let's disseminate this idea more broadly and see if the sort of mainstream world is interested in it. See if we have, and this, I come from a background as a journalist, so trying to gauge the currency of ideas is a really important part of that formula.
You were a tree hugger for
I worked at a site called Tree Hugger for 5-6 years or so, and that was when the idea of sort of consumer-friendly environmentalism was gaining traction as an idea. I think that's the framework that I was working with. So that's year 2. Year 3 was trying to raise money and build more of a viable business. Frankly, there was a moment when we thought we were going to launch a different version of this product, and beginning of year 4 is when we said, okay, I think we've learned a lot. I think we should pause, go back to the drawing board, and redesign what we've made here.
How hard was that moment?
It was really hard. It's hard when you have momentum. It's hard when Wired Magazine is writing about something and saying, this is really cool, and investors are taking interest in what you're doing, and there's a lot of voices saying, keep going, and we decided to pull the brake lever and go back.
What was the dynamic with you and your partner on that?
We have like a crazy mind meld. It's kind of amazing. We have a lot of great creative tension, and we tend to converge. We use a lot of sort of divergent, convergent metaphors, a la sort of the IDEO process, design thinking process. We did some pretty pivotal work with them as well, actually, which I'm happy to talk about. But we always tend to converge in the same place, and it's hard to sort out after the fact whose ideas were whose, which I think is usually a good sign. Yeah. But it was tense. We had something really beautiful that was pretty close to being done, and we had customers who really wanted this thing. It had a dock in it for an iPhone, which at the time seemed a very keen idea. That was an iPhone 4 at that point. Thank God it doesn't have a dock in it anymore. and it would have cost twice on the market. It would have cost twice what this cost. So we took that step back. We went out into the wilderness. We didn't know who we were going to work with to design it. We teamed up with a new relationship, which is always a very scary thing. When you have an idea that you really love and feels like something that you would do no matter what happens, it's really hard to find.
So you're about year 3
partners.
now.
Yeah, well, yeah, year 3, year 4, beginning of year 4.
So how much money have you gone through at this point when you make that pivot?
We had raised about $750,000 in
you pretty much
angel
gone through
investment. More or less.
Okay, all right. So it was a scary thing all around. Then you
We've never been rolling in money, that's for sure.
Okay.
And then we, in harmony with choosing to redesign this, we decided that crowdfunding was what we wanted to do.
Got it.
Like I said, it had been a long journey to decide that was right. We did a lot of weighing Indiegogo versus Kickstarter, and then we spent 6 to 9 months planning the campaign.
Wow.
Shooting that,
Wow.
Getting the video together, really getting our ducks in a row to launch it, interviewing countless PR firms, and then deciding not to use any of them.
Yeah, I've been there.
It's lots of decisions not to do things, and then wondering if that's the right thing to do. And then one thing we did that was that's about year 4.5. We kept the redesign of this product totally under wraps, and we didn't tell anybody we were going to do a Kickstarter campaign until about 48 hours before we launched the campaign. And we had 8,000 people on a mailing list or something who were already kind of fans of the company. There was so much temptation to do the drum roll and try and get them excited ahead of time. That's kind of crowdfunding common knowledge, is like build the hype, build the hype. And we were like, no, let's just do the shock and awe thing and do the big reveal. So 48 hours before, we sent out a email with this shape sort of blurred out, and we were like, we're gonna do a crowdfund campaign. And then 24 hours later, we did a little reveal, and we hit the green button and launched the campaign. So that's
And the rest we've gone through.
Yeah,
So
the
you
rest
raised
we
the money.
know.
So you got between the Kickstarter campaign and then you went up for pre-orders. How many orders did you get net before you shipped?
Kickstarter numbers I'm happy to talk about because they're public. Pre-order numbers we don't talk about because they're not public.
Okay.
But it's a lot, and we're right now just at the beautiful moment where we're about to have fulfilled all of our Kickstarter and pre-order. Thank you.
Good.
Pre-order customers and
So now you're
beyond that.
my friend Andy Carvin already asked online, can I buy one? Can I buy one now? And the answer is yes, Andy, you can.
Yep.
Where do you go to order this?
So Artiphon.com is Artiphon. It's this little Latin Greek mashup of art of sound.
That sounds classy.
Leave it to a philosopher to do that. And we have one retail partner right now, which is the MoMA Design Store. So
Very classy of you.
Two stores in New York and then the one in Tokyo.
So if you want to see it in person, you can go to MoMA.
Yeah, and we have interactive displays there. You can go in and play it.
And the price, once again,
is $399. And there's a case that we design, and there's a strap that we design. So we have 2 colors, 2 accessories, trying to keep it simple.
So scale, anticipating scale. Christmas season is upon us. Good timing. You're right here, right now. You could get hit with a Mack truck in orders. How do you manage controlling the expectations there of saying how many you can fulfill before Christmas or not? How does that work in a product that you don't? Yeah, you got orders before,
right? But
from your best fans. Now to get out there, how do you manage that scale question with your manufacturer?
It's such a balancing act, and you never know what's going to happen. The New York Magazine came out yesterday, and we're in the gift guide, and it's in print, which is really, really awesome. So you never know what's going to happen. We would love to sell out. That's also, that's a whole different PR issue to solve. So yeah, we've just tried to strike a really good balance between having, you can only afford so much inventory. So trying to walk the right line between having a bunch of stuff on hand so you can meet that demand should you get in a explosive runaway holiday season, and not be so conservative that you don't have enough stuff and you miss this is a lot of companies do the bulk of their business in the Q4, and products like this are great sort of gift candidates. So.
If this were Shark Tank and if Mr. Wonderful were here, but I have hair, he doesn't, he'd push you probably to license this. The only way to really scale this thing, be the genius, license this thing, go to a manufacturer that exists. Why not?
It's not out of the question. Who would license it, right? Would it be one of the traditional musical instrument companies? Well, possible. They surely are thinking about how to innovate and keep up with the modern world. People still love guitars and pianos and keyboards, but things are changing really fast. I think a lot of kids' first instruments will look a lot like this, more than a violin or a oboe. Nothing against violins and oboes, but I think most kids' first instruments will be an app on a mobile device. And so traditional companies, may have an interest in being innovative. They're also pretty traditional, and the people who play those instruments are pretty traditional. So the key there would be finding, really having a aligned mindset with a company like that. If it was a licensing thing, sort of hybridize what are more traditional instruments with smart technology, app connection, the multi-instrument concept. It would really have to be aligned with that vision of flexible instruments that let anybody be musical. And I'm not sure that that's something that world's ready for.
Yeah, well, every disrupted industry there is. Do you play with the big guy who's not going to get it but has the resources, or do you strike out? This is a serious instrument. I get that, but it also has the joy of a toy about it. It's too expensive to get your 4-year-old to be banging around with, I think. In a family of products coming up, do you envision different levels of this instrument, different kind of specializations? How do you grow this?
Sure. Well, we have a timeline that looks quite a distance off into the future, and is also looking at technologies that aren't fully mature yet in their own right, but soon will be. That's probably another conversation, but we're very committed to the multi-instrument idea. We have a utility patent on that concept as well, so we're obviously taking it seriously. That can take a lot of different forms. Again, the notion of instruments for everybody certainly implies that we don't want to make price as small a barrier to entry as we can. That said, it is a very sort of pro-friendly instrument, and there are...
Well, I can see it go the other way, too, where you have the $3,000 version that does things that only it can do.
A lot of it is going to be listening to the market, seeing who really takes to it, what sort of user types and what communities find the most utility out of it, and building things for them.
So you also are in an incubator now.
That's true.
Tell me about them.
Sure, absolutely. So our New York home in here is out of a program called New Inc., which is an initiative of the New Museum, which is the sort of bad boy modern art museum of New York. If MoMA is more of the got something for everyone, New Museum tends to push the boundaries a lot more aggressively. And this is case in point. They're in their 3rd year of a program that is a museum-led incubator. So we have a cohort of about 50 different ventures, ranging from solo practitioners to larger entities, doing everything from choreography to VR documentary filmmaking to apparel to product design to design thinking consultancies, and we have a space right sandwiched charmingly between the New Museum and the Bowery Mission. So some days it feels like we're a pretty solid hybrid of the two. You could end up there if you don't do well here. Yeah, exactly. All on the same block down in the Bowery. Yeah, and pretty robust, pretty amazing group of people. Has a strong focus on diversity of its cohort now, and it's taking that more seriously. Certainly something that you probably observe in the startup ecosystem across the nation. is homogeneity
Yep.
more than we would like to see. So New Ink is taking the lead on trying to address that head on, which I think is very powerful and a very good mission to have. And then facing some fascinating challenges. So how do you create an ecosystem that accelerates the needs of people doing very ambitious things that are very diverse?
What I love about that too is that it speaks to what I hope is the strength of New York. That New York is the intersection of technology and. And when you have technology and design and choreography and music and other things, I think we'll do that better than Silicon Valley. I hope that becomes our strength. Silicon Valley is software eats the world. If it's software, we'll eat it. We'll do it. Here, you can do a hardware thing that's in the arts and music that's also about technology and apps. That's what I think New York could be about. So. Lastly, I'm going to just ask about you being in New York, your partner being in Nashville, you have people in LA, you have manufacturers in China. How is that working for you?
I was a freelance journalist for half a decade before this and was always remote. My business partner and I have always lived in separate cities, although we commute around the country a fair bit. And it's certainly a challenge, but we feel like we have kind of made the distributed team thing work. We've really, if you're gonna do it, you really have to own it. Build your, and owning it means understanding what real organic human process is and what's powerful about that, and making sure you're bringing those principles into a world of Google Hangouts and FaceTime audio calls and Slack chats, and if that means like making sure that somebody's face is, if they're not in the room, they're on a monitor that's big enough that they actually have physical presence in the room. Go out of your way and do that, and don't start the meeting until everyone can really hear what's going on and everyone's visible and everyone's internet connection is good. Otherwise, those people get marginalized and get sort of pushed to the periphery, and you don't get the voices at the table that you really need. Not to say it's without its challenges, but I think it is totally workable, and that people can find the advantages in having a distributed team. I mean, having a foot in Music City, in New York, and in LA is a force multiplier. But you've got to work extra. You've got to really put the emphasis on bringing those making sure everyone's voice is audible the way it needs to be, metaphorically and literally speaking.
So you're out there with orders. You've got your own roadmap going forward. Are you raising more money?
Yeah, we are. We love meeting investors, especially people who care a lot about
as art.
Yeah, people who care a lot about music, people who care about creative technologies, people who are not afraid of hardware, or are afraid of hardware and want to get over their fears of hardware. We will help you. Raising money, pitching, and doing the sort of networking activities of that is a big part of our lives.
And who does most of that, you or your partner?
We tag team it a lot. It's nice to be spread out. He's the CEO, so it's top of his job description to make sure there's money in the bank. So,
and your main roles are what?
So I play the role of CMO. I run the marketing department, and that means brand strategy, customer strategy, lots of stuff like this. But I am also co-founder, so that means taking a lot of the business development, investment development, and just making sure the ship is being steered in the right direction.
Last question. What instrument tortured you when you were a kid?
Oh my goodness. That's a great question, and a very loaded way to phrase it. I started out playing saxophone and woodwind stuff, and had a very tearful moment with my parents when I was young, because I wanted to switch to the electric guitar, and they were like, "God, do it, dude!" And I was like, "Okay." And I was never an outstanding musician, but I always loved it, and I think that's part of what really. Oh well, then I moved to Nashville, and I got really into country music. I played steel guitar in the honky tonks in Nashville for 5 years, and part of what I loved about that so much was it was just simple. Yeah. It was just getting together with other people and making rather simple music that just made people smile and dance. And it took me a while to realize the gem of a lesson that I learned there, but it's so much about what we're trying to do here, which is that you don't need to be a superstar.
You don't need to be a snob.
Yeah, you don't need to be a gearhead, and you don't need to be Mozart to enjoy how life-affirming and awesome it is to be able to sit down and make music that you like.
Jacob, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure talking. I could go on for hours, and I want to start playing with this too, but I won't, because we got to move on. And we're going to end our startup stories here. Next, in a little while, we're going to be taping and doing live on Facebook and the world our friendly pitch show, and then after that, Instructable. So that's it for this episode of dotNYC's Startup Stories. Thank you very much, and thank you, Jacob.
Thank you.
Bye.